Hello everyone and welcome to today's webcast, Exploring PDM Professional. I'm your moderator, Krista Prokos. Before we get started, I want to let you know that you can submit your questions for today's presenter by typing them into the Q&A box up in the right-hand corner. You may send your questions at any time during the presentation and we'll collect them and address them during that Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. I also want to mention that there will be a recorded version of this webcast, and we will send you the link in a follow-up email. Now I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Joe Frank. Joe is an application engineer and PDM expert at Fisher Unitech. Joe, take it away.
Why, thank you, Krista. Good morning, everyone. And as Krista said, I'm an application engineer here at Fisher, and I've been working in PDM for quite a few years. And I have to tell you a funny little story here real quick. I remember I was thinking back to my history, 25 years in automotive and everything I've done. I've worked on convertible tops for literally decades. So if you've ever seen a convertible top running around here, all your US-based cars, I guarantee you I've had my fingers in on the engineering of that project some way. But it was kind of funny. I thought back to 2012 when I actually started using PDM. I was in a work group environment and I started working for a company that had PDM. So I thought, well, PDM going from one company to the other, it's going to be no different. It'll be a piece of software I'm used to. And when I first logged in, I realized it wasn't work group. I was logging into this new thing called ePDM. Oh my gosh, what's that? So I still remember back in 2012 when I first migrated from work group to a PDM. In that case, it was ePDM, which is now known as PDM Professional. And so I've been there. I remember what it was like. It was a little scary, learning the new faceplate and the user interface. But quickly, I remember starting to use it so much that within a few months, I was the systems administrator for it. It's a nice software. So let's move a little forward here. Today's agenda. What are we going to talk about? Well, obviously, we're going to initiate the conversation talking about the work group retirement. So we're going to talk about the timeline and where we are in that timeline and how things are progressing in that vein. And then we're going to dig into the things that are the same between PDM Standard Professional, trying to give you a little bit of a taste of what is changing and what is not changing between the two platforms. And then obviously we'll go into a demo where we're going to dig deep into some real nice features inside PDM Professional, and then we'll roll into next steps and into some Q&A. Timeline. Well, as you can see down here on the chart, the most important thing to focus on is the information in red. We are pretty much right here in the first quarter of 2017, and as you can see, we've got till usually we all know that Service Pack 5 and going into 2018 Service Pack 1 is going to come out in that October time frame, late September. So when we start seeing those rollouts of the 2018 software, we're not going to see workgroup in that install bundle. So that's where the clock starts ticking, that we no longer have it to install on our systems. Now, some of us, might be lucky enough we're in a smaller company and we're doing, every service pack or, a couple of times a year we're doing software upgrades, and maybe you're on an annual cycle or a every other year cycle, depending on how big your company gets. But nevertheless, we want to watch closely that timeline is getting closer, and then by the end of calendar year 2018, SOLIDWORKS will actually stop supporting the workgroup environment. So the call to action, the time is now. We really want to work on the migration here in this near term. What is the same and what is different? Well, obviously, we're going to be talking about the differences, the upscale features, the benefits, enhancements, whatever you want to call them in PDM Professional. We'll see that inside the demo. But the big thing I want to impress upon you here is the user interface. In last month's webcast, I spoke to a demo set that was very similar to the screenshot you see here, and I was using a PDM Standard Vault environment. And the user interface that I used in that web class is the exact same user interface I'll be using and demonstrating today. And the other thing that is exactly the same is the administration tool. Those are the two key interfaces, users and CAD administrators, power users as I call them. Those two interfaces are the same between the two softwares. It is not really a different software. It is the same. There are just enhancements and some architectural changes in the software when we go from PDM Standard to PDM Professional. Now, those of you that are coming from a workgroup environment or no vault environment and did not see last month's webcast, we'll spend a little bit of time between these two briefly before we get started into our demo set, so that if you're not familiar with the interface and the tool, you'll get a little bit of a snippet of that before I go into my demo. Now, when we speak to PDM Pro, there are two key features that the majority of the customers, when we demonstrate the PDM software, ask for when they migrate from, say, a PDM Standard to a PDM Pro. So we start off our demo, say, with a PDM Standard demo, and quickly the customer may start asking for some enhancements or features. Can PDM do this? Can PDM do that? And the number one and number two items that customers ask for are called tasks or templates. And we're going to see both those in action today in a multiple forms. But here I have a snapshot of what's called a workflow, and we'll see that in action. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the demo. And I have this transition, it's called, that moves a file from the state called pending approval to a state called release. And in that transition, I call for a task to create an actual PDF of a SOLIDWORKS drawing. So we're going to see that in action. We're going to dive into the tool itself. We're going to dive into the usage from the user interface standpoint, and then getting into templates. Again, this is the other thing that customers frequently ask for when they're looking at PDM Pro over PDM Standard. And templates, the couple screenshots I've got here, and we're going to go into this exact example a little bit later here, is where I automatically create project folders. So think of templates as whenever you're doing something repetitious, much like when I'm making PDFs. Is it something you do several times during the day, or at the end of a project, or at the end of the life cycle, something that's occurring in your design process? Well, then you want to think about initiating a task or a template, because it saves you those redundancies. It does them for you. It automates behind the scenes, and as I like to say, PDM starts to pay me back. It starts to work for me. So let's get into the fun stuff. Let's get out of PowerPoint here, and we'll jump right into my vault environment. So here I've logged into one of my vaults, and again, if you were around for last month's webcast, or if you've seen any one of our demos, PDM demos, this is the user interface, and it's Windows Explorer. Obviously, PDM has enhanced this Explorer view and put a serious amount of nice features have been added to this Windows Explorer interface. First thing I want you to notice is across the top of the screen, we have these various columns, and these columns are adjustable just like they would be in Windows, and they're sortable. We can do ascending or descending on any one of these columns, and they're all totally customizable, because each one of these columns that you see across the top here may be different for your business needs than, say, from mine for the demo set. For me, I wanted obviously the file name occurring in this first column, the description occurring in the second column, and then we're going to get into some new columns that are new to each one of us. We have this checked out by, well, that's the user, and we're going to see this in action. That's the user that actually checks out the file and has ownership rights. If you're in a workgroup environment, we talk about ownership. Here we talk about checking out. We talk about states. You might be used to the word life cycles in PDM. So far, a couple of these columns are not too scary new. They got different names, but they're similar to features you're used to seeing. We get into these two columns here, revision and version column, and we'll see those in action as well as I move through the demo. But the big thing I want to use here is an analogy that if you were in last month or in a demo, you'll hear me use frequently. And my analogy is this. Think of a vault and the files that go into the vault in this way. File lands in the vault as a manila folder. When that manila folder is placed into the vault, there's a single sheet of paper that goes into that vault, and that's the first version of the file. Tomorrow, somebody else checks out the file, makes some changes to it, checks it back into the vault, and when they do, the vault places a second sheet of paper in that manila folder. Each sheet of paper is a version, so you would see these version numbers growing. And then, say at the end of the day, when the file was all done being modified, and you said, okay, I'm ready to release these drawings or parts or assemblies to the shop so that we can start manufacturing them. Well, I want to release them, and well, we all know that we love to have those revision letters on there. You know, in this case, this part actually has a revision C on it. Well, what the vault does behind the scenes when I release that final version, in this case version 9, the vault behind the scenes goes and puts that revision stamp C on that 9th sheet of paper in that manila folder, using my analogy. So what we have is we have versions and we have revisions, and the vault pays attention to those in the background for us. So when you hear me speak to revisions, you know I'm speaking to that letter, or in this case it's a letter. It can be alpha characters, it can be numeric characters, whatever you want set up for your business model. But when we're talking to versions, we're talking about those sheets of paper, and you can maybe even look at those as working copies if that's a little easier for you to remember. But we have versions and revisions. We even have a customized column here I built called type, and it's for purchased or built parts so that I can search by those and look at my files that way. Down here at the bottom of the screen, this is where we get some really cool features that you don't see in a Windows environment, and that is, notice the preview tab. That's what we call an eDrawings hook that's loaded in the background, and it's using just that, eDrawings, to let me see a preview of the file. I could actually turn on some user interface tools and measure features within this model right from within the preview here. I don't have to use SOLIDWORKS and open the file. Click on the data card tab. What does it mean? Just that. It's a data card. It is kind of the sticky note, if you will, that carries all the metadata or additional information you care about for your file. It's not necessarily, well, in most cases it is custom properties. Those of you that are used to custom properties inside SOLIDWORKS files, those custom properties would be mapped to the data card, but additional information can be mapped there too. But the data card is just that. It's the repository for that ancillary information. Version tab, well, we knew that we already spoke to this. Now, something I didn't speak to, and I should clarify, notice how we see 2 numbers up here on any given file. In the case of my file, I'll pick back on that 227 I was on right here. We'll go back to preview. Yep, I'm still on him. Notice how I have a 9/9. What that tells me is I have locally loaded on my machine version 9 of 9 versions in the vault. That means my machine, my local machine where I'm working on files, is up to date with what's in the vault, and that's what that equal to symbol means. So just wanted to touch back on that one. And then Bill of Material tab, well, that's pretty straightforward. Then we get into the Contains and Where Used tab. Contains is much like a Bill of Material tab, and we're going to see the Contains and Where Used in a little bit of action further on when we get into some engineering change samples. But Contains, I want you to notice the icon here. It has a top-down look. It's that parent-child relationship. And when we do a Where Used tab, it's that child looking up at its parents. So as you can see here, 227, even though it's going down and indenting, it's looking upstream at the parent relationships. What is it used by? Where the Contains tab is much like the Bill of Material. It says what's inside this assembly. So we're getting a little bit of a flavor of the user interface now. This was of what I call my demo vault. Let's actually get into the nuts and bolts of the demonstration for today. So I'm going to click on a different vault. I have several vaults installed here in my machine that I've built for different lessons I show customers and do some training to. And the first one I want to pick on is called this Convert task. So we're going to speak to that one. So what I have here is I have several files already setting in my vault in a state pending approval. Okay, well, what's this pending approval state? Well, let's open up the admin tool and take a quick peek at that. I'm going to go right into the node tree for my particular vault. This is kind of the heartbeat of the inner workings of my vault, and this is something you would learn how to use when you take our two-day administration class for whether it's PDM Standard or PDM Professional. You become very knowledgeable in this node tree and how it sets up and deploys your vault. I'm going to double-click on this main CAD workflow, and it's actually a flow chart that shows me how the files are going to move through my vault, the states they're going to move through. all my files in this particular demo are going to start in a state called pending approval. Then they will transition through release documents to the state called released. And obviously I also have these red transitions, and these are called automatic transitions, that when I make some of these PDFs we're going to see made, they're going to automatically land in one of these 4 states all by themselves based on some attributes I've built. We don't need to go into the nuts and bolts of those and how they work today. That's a topic for another webcast. And again, you'd also learn how to do those in your administration class. But the big thing I want you to notice is we're going to be dealing with a workflow, and we're going to see the files move from this state pending approval to this state here, and then our PDFs will land in these states here. So how do we make those happen? Well, I'm going to take these files, and I guess maybe I should go right back here real quick. Right here inside Release Documents, let's open that up, and notice inside the Actions tab here, I have Execute Tasks. And these tasks are all the ones that are literally I call them watchdogs. It's watching that if an SLD DRW comes through the process, it's going to create a PDF. Same thing for Office documents. Same thing for some DWGs, some draft site files. And the same thing here if I'm sending through some parts or assemblies, I might want some 3D PDFs made, some MVDs. So these tasks are all sitting here waiting in the background to be run if a particular file passes through that transition. So let's watch those do just that. We're going to take these files here. We're going to right-click on them. And since I have the permission to do that, I'm going to say Change State, Release Documents. That's sending them through that transition. So when I do that over on my other screen, it pops up with and this is typical for any file moving through the vault. It's saying, all right, do you want to change the state of these files? This is kind of your final, are you sure? I can maybe enter a comment down here if I want. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and all these files are going to start moving their states. And of course, the next thing that I deliberately have my vault do is I have it pop up and say, okay, when I'm making 3D PDFs, since I see a couple files I want to make some PDFs of, do you want me to use the standard 3D views? Is there anything unique you want me to do there? I go ahead and hit OK. And then it says here, all right, well, when I'm making a PDF of a drawing, do you want me to use the all sheets, the last active sheet, or a particular sheet inside the names of the sheets? And again, I had it pause here just to show me some of the features inside the tool. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Notice all the states changed on the files from that pending approval to released. SOLIDWORKS is in the background making PDFs on my other screen. It's firing up all by itself, making the files and running them. And we see the versions are bumping because, again, it's changing attributes inside the file, so it's changing the versions as required. And you can see here on the 3 particular CAD files, I had revision control in place, so the Ds are now Es. I could put stuff into other files, revisions into other files, but I chose not to for this vault. So now let's take a look at the PDF subfolder, because that's where I told it to put all these PDFs. So what did this convert task do for me? Well, when I go into here, the first thing I'll notice, and I think it might be done with all of them, it sure is, because I can see the date stamps on all my files are at the current timestamps, so I know all my PDFs have been run. And sure enough, right off the bat, I can see at the top of the list here, I have a Word document that in PDM Pro, I have a hook that lets me see these Office documents. Well, I also have another Office document, I believe, and there it is right there. It was my test Excel file. So when I click on that, there was my Excel file as well. Both those have been automatically created, the Vault has automatically created PDFs of both those Office documents and dropped them in the Vault in this PDF folder and given them a state name of Office PDF. And I did that just as an added clarifier. Next thing we see happening is we can see that it took our drawing that we had, our SLD DRW, our traditional SOLIDWORKS drawing, and it made a PDF of that because I also asked it to make one of those. And you can see I had revision control automatically placed on that drawing as well when it came into the Vault, that PDF. And then we've got a draft site, so we know what this guy is. That was actually taking a DWG that was going through workflow and creating a PDF of it. And then last but not least, looks like we've got both. And I think, yep, I've got to turn some options on here. I'll click down here. There we go. And we can see that I've got MVD at play here. So I've got my 3D PDF for my assembly. And if I pick back up here on my part file, I've also got that kicking. So when I click here, we can see that I have and I've got a generic format here that could be changed as far as your templates. But what I want you to recognize is we sent several file types through, and let's go back up into our vault. And I'm waiting for my vault. It's being a little bit lethargic here. Hopefully it's not going to crash. That would be a terrible thing. Come on, there we go, it's working. Now, if we think back to the original files we moved through our workflow, we moved them through this workflow transition, and we asked for that action in there to watch for them. It took Word documents, Excel documents, part files, drawings, assemblies, DWGs, took all these and made PDFs of them. That's the power of the convert command inside a Vault environment. Prior to 2017, we could easily make our drawing files go to PDFs, but it was a little tougher to, actually it wasn't doable in 2016 or older, any of these other file types, whereas now we have 3 additional tools inside our convert portfolio that says we can now pretty much make a PDF of just about anything the typical department or engineering department is going to push through a workflow. And of course, the obvious nice thing about having these PDFs is we can have our shop users and ancillary departments that need to have viewing rights to our Vault environment. They can see these PDFs. They don't need to see the master or original files, the SOLIDWORKS files. They don't need SOLIDWORKS installed. They don't even have Office installed. They just need the typical Adobe Acrobat viewer. Now let's take a peek in the admin tool and appreciate what it did. Well, we know we were calling for an action here in that transition. And when I clicked on that, we saw right there we had several of these going on. So let's take a look at the most standard one, and that says, okay, I want you to execute a task called Convert to PDF, and I want you to act upon that task whenever you have an SLD DRW coming through the workflow. So anytime a SOLIDWORKS drawing is coming through, make a traditional PDF. Let's take a peek at that actual task. So I'm going to come over here to my tasks, and I'm going to come down here to Convert to PDF. And when I open that up, there's where it's happening. I can see I can come right down here to conversion settings, and I can see where I told it, when you run it on the last active configuration of the file and make me a PDF. And by the way, something I want you to notice, it's not just PDFs. These convert tools have some pretty serious strengths. As you can see in here, yes, we made PDFs. I can make 3D PDFs. I can make 3D XMLs. Obviously, I can move down into DXF if, say, you want to send a stamping. A good example is saying a flat pattern of a stamping out to the shop floor for laser or water jet or plasma. They like to have DXFs. I can make DWGs if I want. I can also make my e-drawings. If we want my default viewer out in the shop to not be Adobe, you want it to be e-drawings, well, we can make the EPRTs, ASMs, and EDRWs. Obviously, if we're doing some subtractive manufacturing, we want to make some chips, some CNC, somebody's going to make some G-code off of our parts, well, we can send out to the shop some parasolids, or we can send out some step files. If we're going to do some additive manufacturing, we're going to put to work one of those Stratasys printers, well, we can make some .stl files as well. So the Convert tool is a pretty powerful exporting methodology. It's not just about PDFs. Obviously, we're focusing on PDFs today, but I wanted to do a little bit of a segment there. So we're getting a taste of what the standard convert does. Let's take a peek at a couple of the other ones. Well, here we also said convert to PDF of some Office documents. Well, what was this one doing? It said if anything comes through that's a PowerPoint, an Excel, or a Word doc, let's go ahead and use that command, the Office to PDF, and run those through. So let's take a peek at this guy right here. So we'll come over here and we'll look at the Office to PDF task down here in my task list. Let's open him up and take a peek at him. And sure enough, when I get down into the options, I can see where I can tell it how I want it to handle a Word document, how I want it to handle Excel or PowerPoint. Now, this convert tool does not have the benefit like we saw in the drawings tool. This one just makes PDFs, so there's some of the limitations in its tabular functions. It says, look, I know we're only going to be dealing with Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and I'm only tooled up to make PDFs at this point in this tool, so you can't make additional options there. And let's take a peek at, say, Draft Site. We'll pick on that one real quick so we can see that that one is running the Draft Site to PDF. All right, we'll come over here and fire up that task. Oops, let me hit it. Oh, and by the way, notice it's running on only DWGs. So again, this is how these triggers can be told. If you're a DWG, I want you to run this task. So let's go over and look at the draft site task. When I double click on that one, sure enough, I have similar feeling or screenshots here where it's telling me, let's see, actually this one is actually a little more limited here. It doesn't even let me choose the additional formats. It just says I'm going to make a PDF, and it's asking me where do you want me to put the files, how do you want me to name the files, things of that nature. And last but not least is the Office, or not the Office, I'll find it, 3D PDF. We'll open that task. That's the one that gets into the MVD side of things. And let's see if that one has, yeah, conversion settings. So this one for assemblies that are coming through this task or part files coming through, I can have it pull different views. Do I want to pull the primary views? How do I want it to create that 3D PDF document for me? So again, we're getting a taste of how those converts are being triggered. How are those tasks being triggered? At what point in a workflow? Well, when they transition the file from state pending approval to state released, it happened in this transition, and it happened at any one of these actions depending on the type of file that was passing through. So we got a pretty good feel now that we have multiple tasks that are disposable in 2017. Obviously, we had the convert task in 2016, but we've grown with 3 new ones in 2017. And let's minimize out of this admin tool for now. I'll close out of this workflow. And the next thing we're going to talk about is let's get into templates. First thing I want to show you in templates, and it's a classic example customers ask for. I've had several customers implement a ideology in templates very similar to this one. So I'm going to go into this lesson vault, and it's called Project Folder Templates. So what's going on inside here? Well, let's say you were a customer that you have a folder structure every time you have a job, and you'd like it to be consistent. What do I mean by consistent? Well, job 1, 2, 3, when I double click on it, we have some documents in here, but I have a sales, manufacturing, fabrication, and customer folder. All right, well, when I go back into my vault and I pick on job 4, 5, 6, I want to see a similar folder structure. And maybe you don't have that clean of a folder structure, but a lot of customers want that cleanliness in their vault environment or in any network environment where they're structuring their files. They'd like to have that consistency. There's no tribal knowledge needed to say, oh, well, when Jim files his drawings or his documents in his folder, he puts them in folders named like this, where John, when he does it, he puts them in folders that are named like that. We'd like to keep some consistency. Well, when you start wanting that consistency, project templates can really rise to the occasion. And what I did is I created a template that says, when I say new, create project folders, it comes up with this nice little template card that says, okay, what do you want to call the project number, Joe? And let me go back here. I'm going to cancel out real quick. Let's take a peek at what jobs I've got. I've got 4, 5, 6. Let's do a 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to right click, new project folder. So I've got a job that's called, if I could type, there we go, job 7, 8, 9. What is the customer? Let's call him Acme. Where's he located? He's anywhere USA. And then I also had a drop-down box here where the customer said, hey, I want to be able to assign an engineer so that if anybody's in these folders, they know who the engineer is on the project, who to go talk to. Whoever said PDM people never had a sense of humor. I'm going to pick Luke Skywalker for the assigned engineer, and I'm going to hit OK. So what happens in the background? You can see that it pops up with this document. It says, okay, do you want to go ahead and work on this checklist, or do you want to just create the file? I'm going to go ahead and create the file. Well, what was that? Well, right off the bat, we saw that it created automatically for me the folder job 789, and then it created all the subfolders. It automatically populated each one of those subfolders in there, and it threw in a template document. In this case, the manager said, I want this project initiation checklist for, and notice how the name of the document, it's just not a generic document thrown into this folder. It actually incorporated the name, job 789, right inside the file name when it placed it inside this vault folder. Notice the preview. That's the Windows, that's the Office Suite. Hook is loaded in PDM Pro, so you can see Office documents automatically previewing. I'm going to go ahead and double click on that document, enable content, and now notice how even information is automatically starting to pollinate through to this checklist document. It's that reuse of data. You don't have to keep entering job 7, 8, 9 on every document that's going inside this folder. I can have that linked back to the folder card, back to the metadata of this particular file or this particular folder. So I'm going to close out of this file. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at what the Vault did a little more specifically. Here's job 7, 8, 9. And when I pick on the data card, notice how there's a data card for the folder, and it tells me it's job 7, 8, 9, customer Acme, all that information I filled out, and it tells me that it was created on this date by user admin, and the assigned engineer is Luke. All right, so that project folder information is also fed downstream into all the subfolders, and that's how it also got fed through to that checklist. Notice that file, that Word document, also has a data card, and there's some attributes that are automatically pollinating right there, job 7, 8, 9. So again, it's that data reuse. A project template, a folder template in this case, not only can build you a consistent folder structure, but it can throw in some template documents, and it can control those for you. It can help you mainstream those and get them into the Vault quicker than you could doing it manually yourself. And the best part of all is its consistency. It's that non-need for tribal knowledge. All users know how to do that. They know how to create the folder structure, and the tool automatically does it for them. It doesn't matter what job you're in, you know where to go find the information. The next example of a template I want to show you is in ECN Template Vault. So here I'm going to go into a totally different vault. And this one is a little different. This is if you're working in an engineering company, or most of us, at least at one point or another in our lives, have been exposed to an engineering change system. And if you haven't, I'd say count yourself lucky, because it means your company's growing and you're getting into a collaborative environment, and you've got to start documenting and showing a history, either for your customer's sake, or like a lot of us, we have to comply to some type of annual audits, whether it's ISO, QS, TS 16949, whatever the audit standard is, the famous do what you say what you do, and document it. Well, engineering change notices are a method of documenting what we're going to do for changes or how we're going to process changes. Well, we can automate or streamline that process too. So here in this vault, I've got some designs. In this subfolder called designs, I've got several projects running. In this case, I've got 4 of them. All right, so I'm going to go back up to the vault, and I'm just going to right click here and say that I want to do a new document, and it's engineering change document. So I want to do an engineering change. So first thing it says is, what project do you want to run it against? Well, I can maybe enter the project name here, but in this case, I'm just going to select a drop down, and this is actually querying my database. It's going behind the scenes into SQL. It's going into the backbone of this software and saying, I'm going to go look in the design subfolder, and I'm going to get a list of all the folders that are in there. And in this case, as we just saw, there was 4 folders in there, and it sees all 4 of those. So I'm going to pick project 4, and I'm going to hit OK. So that quick, I see a document come up, and it's wanting to create an engineering change document. And the next available number out of our serialized numbering system is 1065. No need to go to the engineering library, grab the famous engineering change book and pull the next number, or go to the spreadsheet on the network drive and pull the next number. It's right here. It automatically does it for you. The Vault is keeping up on who pulled the last number, what is the next number available. Now I'm going to click on this little button down here I put in, and a customer actually asked me to do this. I'm going to say Open Engineering Change Folder. And when I click on that, another window opens, and I'm going to move that window down out of my way for now, just so it's here. And I'm going to say go ahead and create the file. So what happened? Well, let me get back to that folder and bring it back up here. I automatically had a window open that took me right to the engineering change document. Well, why did the customer want that? Well, let's take a peek. I'm going to drag that back down and pick on this other one, and notice, well, I know I told it project 4, but I got to go to designs, and I got to go to project 4, and then, oh, it's in documentation subfolder, and oh, there's the engineering change notices. There's several, and there's my document. I got to do a lot of drilling, and here I only had to drill down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down from the root, 4 down from the root. it could have been a lot worse. So why have me go drilling after I created that document? I can automatically open me to that folder. And why has that happened? Because the vast majority of engineers, or anybody for that matter, as soon as you make that engineering change, you're going to be working on that document, or maybe adding additional information to this document. And what I mean by that is, let me go over to my other screen briefly, and I'm going to open up a folder. Let's say you had some files you wanted to put with that engineering change notice. You wanted to put a document in there. Maybe it was a drawing or something you wanted to reference to that ECN, or maybe it was a Word document. I'm going to drag this Word document, just simple drag and drop to that folder. Maybe this Word document with some notes and some photos about the prototype build, and I want it tied with that engineering change notice so that anybody looking at that document and approving it would appreciate what went along with it. Okay, well that's good. But I want those two to ride along with each other. I want them to reference each other. Right now, they're just two documents in a network folder like we do in a Windows environment or any environment. Well, in a Vault environment, we can make those kind of link to each other. And the best way to do that is I'm going to right-click on this file, and I'm going to say copy. It's a simple copy like we would do in, Control-C using our clipboard. It's copied to the clipboard. Now I'm going to pick on this document, the engineering change notice. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say paste as reference. Now what that does on my other screen, it popped up a window. I'm going to uncheck that box. I'm going to tell it to go ahead and add the reference. So what did it do? Well, notice it says it's updated. That's no longer equal to. It says, hey, I've updated a reference. I've updated a piece of metadata. So your local version on your machine, Joe, no longer matches what's in the vault. You're newer than what's in the vault. So I better check that in real quick. Let's check in that document, and I probably should have checked in the other one, and it checked in both of them for me. It no longer says checked out by user admin. It's released those files back to the vault. And now let's see those contains tabs and those where used tabs come to life. When I click on the contains tab and I pick on the engineering change notice, notice it references that Word document down here. You wouldn't see that in a bill of material tab. Of course, this document doesn't, it's a document, so it's not an assembly per se. But the contains tab is a little different, just like the where used tab is. It supports looking at those reference documents. Well, let's see if we see that parent to child relationship occurring here. Let's see if it looks the other way for us. So I'm going to pick on the Word document, and I'm going to pick on the where used. And we see the exact opposite is occurring. The where used, well, this Word document is used in this engineering change document. So we're now getting a taste of how these two tabs play in an assembly environment, in a SOLIDWORKS environment. We know contains is doing that child relationship, what's in the assembly. We know the where used is looking upstream. Where is this component or assembly used elsewhere outside the subassembly? Looking up. Well, we also recognize now that these two tabs support these reference documents. So this is an excellent use of reference documents, and it's a very typical use of reference documents when it comes to deploying an engineering change system or a template into your vault. So how did this template work? How did it do it? Well, just like the other template, I'm going to go into the admin tool, and we're going to speak about templates from the admin side. So we'll come down here, and we knew we were in tasks here earlier, but we need to go into the next node down, and we notice we have this template called Create Project Folders. And when I come over here, I can see I'm telling my vault to build off the current folder. I want you to build a project folder and name it accordingly and build all these subfolders, and down inside these subfolders, like in this one's case, it says I want you to put this project initiation checklist. Oh, I missed that document earlier. I didn't talk about that. Well, let's close out of that real quick, that template, and let's go back to this vault. And because again, we're speaking to project templates and engineering changes at the same time. So let's go back to our project folder vault, and let's go back to 789. Yes, there's our oh, we did speak to that document. Yes, we did. And there's how that happened. You can see that that document landed in the vault at the root of all these subfolders. Well, let's go back to that tool, And let's go back to the project folder template. Did we see that occurring in here? We sure did. There's where it was at the root of the project folder. We told it to place a document in there, go get it out of our vault, a template document, put it in there. So again, I'm not trying to show you how to build this. You'll learn a flavor of how to do these templates inside your administration class, the 2-day class we offer. But there's how the template for project folders was created. Now let's go to the engineering change one. So I'm going to minimize this vault, and we're going to go up here to our engineering change vault and go down to templates as well. There's our document, ECN document. There's our template. So let's see what that one was doing. We get right down into there, and sure enough, this one said, okay, go to the project that Joe selected in the list, create a documentation subfolder if it's not there. If it is, go inside the documentation folder, create an engineering change folder and name it accordingly, EC, and it's using this runtime variable we call it. And by the way, put that document right inside that folder. And sure enough, we saw when we went back here, if we went into our engineering change vault and we went into our designs and went into project 4 documentation, there was our engineering change folder and there was our engineering change document, and it was named. Notice the engineering change document is named for me, EC1065. There we talk about those folder cards, the information automatically being pollinated to the data card. Let's open that Word document, see if we've got some attributes going on inside the document, and sure enough, a couple things I want you to notice. Well, right off the bat, we're pollinating the engineering change notice to that face of the document. Don't have to re-enter that piece of information. Don't have to enter the project number anymore. And then notice down here, ECN relates to. This ECN document is actually looking at any reference documents that have been linked to it. So that test Word document that we put into our vault is showing up here as a reference document. So if I were to put some drawings or some assemblies or parts, they would as well appear in this list. So again, we're talking about that data reuse. Why should I have to re-enter that information again and again? And information that is relevant to this engineering change notice is automatically feeding into this. Now, this is obviously a very generic engineering change document, but it's meant to show you that pollination of that information is occurring. So we'll drop out of that document, and again, we can see where pieces of that information are coming back into the data card for the document. We can see the engineering change numbers there. If I click on project info, there's project 4 is automatically pollinating, because again, these are pieces of metadata that I had linked to each other so that it would happen for me automatically. Why retype that over and over again? Okay, so we've discussed 3 different key areas inside our vaults as far as PDM Pro is considered. We went into convert tasks and we saw how we could make our PDFs. We got a good taste of several different types of PDFs, including the features that are new to 2017. We went into project folder templates, and we got to see how we created our project folder for job 789 and the documents and the subfolders for it. And then obviously we went into another project or another template, which was for engineering change notices, and got to see that. And again, these are the 3 most fundamental areas that customers ask for when it comes to saying, I want to migrate from PDM Standard to PDM Pro, or I think PDM Pro is going to be better for me right out of the chute, migrating to a vault environment because I want to engage in some of these enhancements in PDM, and as I say, starting to get PDM to pay you back. So with that, that ends our demonstration. Let me now flip back to PowerPoint here and click on the next slide here. Yes, we're into Q&A. So, Krista, I turn the floor back to you. Do we have any questions in the chat or in the Q&A area?
Thank you, Joe. We do have a lot of questions. The first one is, since Workgroup is retiring, will SOLIDWORKS Explorer also be retired?
Good question. That one's starting to pop up. And for those of you that are on a little bit more on the administrative side, whenever you install Workgroup, the new software, usually you'll notice that Workgroup and SOLIDWORKS Explorer go hand in hand. They're installed together. So we've had some customers asking, am I going to lose that when I lose Workgroup? And the answer from SOLIDWORKS is no. They will be keeping SOLIDWORKS Explorer. That is the latest I've heard from them.
Thank you. The next question is, does the Office task export to anything other than PDF?
Good question. And if you recall, when we were back inside the actual tasks, when we were into SOLIDWORKS drawings and things like that, we obviously saw that the task had the tremendous ability to export to just about any format, but the actual converter for making PDFs of Office documents, no. Right now that tool is just making PDFs.
Thank you. The next question, can the ECN reference CAD files too?
Yes, and I think probably the best way to point that out, whoops, I bumped forward one slide. Let me kick out of the PowerPoint real quick. In the ECN Vault, let me go right into our Designs folder and make sure I understood that question. Yes, I can reference any kind of a document. Whoops, I didn't mean to double click that. I can reference any kind of a document here. Here I referenced a Word document. I can reference any type of a file. Any file type you drop in here, you can right-click copy, and then you can go into here and right-click paste as reference.
Great, thank you. The next question, is the convert command only in PDM Professional, or is it also in Standard?
It is not in Standard. That is what we call a limitation to SQL Express. That gets into the IT side of things, but fundamentally speaking, PDM Standard runs on what we call a SQL Express backbone, and PDM Professional runs on SQL Standard. And when you deal with those two different architectures, SOLIDWORKS said we were not able to have tasks being supported in PDM Standard, only in PDM Pro.
Okay, thank you. This question from one of the attendees, it says, we are running Workgroup Advanced Server and we use PDM Web. Is PDM Web available in PDM Pro? Can you show this if so?
There is a Web 2 client in PDM Pro, and I do not have that installed on this laptop right now, so I cannot show it, but it does, we do have that web interface for PDM Pro customers. That is not an option in PDM Standard. It is only in PDM Pro. And if you call us and hit us up for a demo, make sure that when you ask for it that you want to see that web interface, and that is called Web 2 in PDM Pro. And to simply speak to that, that's Web 2 goes so far as to have smartphone interface for customers that want to actually view, say, an e-drawings or PDF and approve a file outside the work environment, outside the network. They can use that smartphone and that interface. So that is Web 2 you're speaking to, and again, that is only in PDM Pro.
Okay, Joe, thank you. Another question is, can this support other CAD documents such as Creo or CATIA?
It gets a little, the answer is, in a generic sense, yes. We can put other CAD files in the vault. Any file type can be dropped in the vault. You can make a fictitious file extension, .xyz, and that's probably even claimed by some software company, but .abc, doesn't matter. You tell the vault that I want to let this extension into the vault and where I want it to land and what workflow, and it can land in there. Now, obviously, when we start talking about CAD files, whether it's a Pro-E or whether it's CATIA or Creo, we start worrying about those assemblies and those external references to other files. There is no add-in for CATIA files right now when it gets to those references and how they're handled. And I do not know of one that is to be published, to my knowledge, from SOLIDWORKS. I know with Creo files, I believe there's not an issue with supporting those, and I know there is an add-in, for example, like with Pro-E. There is a tool in there or an add-in or a hook that lets us support those file references. Because again, it comes down to if you want to put that native CAD file in the vault, that's one thing. But if you want its references to be maintained, again, speaking to an assembly, then we got to make sure that the vault has that knowledge set of how those references are handled. So it would have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. I know for CATIA, again, I'm almost positive that's a no. Pro-E, there is one out there, and Creo, I think, is a yes.
Okay. This is along the same lines. Can I put emails in a vault?
Oh, you can put any file in a vault. And another example is going back to that ECN. I might want to tie an email from my boss, or say a customer that was initiating that change request. Why am I asking for this change? A customer sent me an email, says I want this hole larger, smaller, I want to change a bowl pattern, whatever. Again, it's just a file type. So we can place that in the vault and have that referenced right to that document, referenced to any type of document.
The next question pertains to training. And if you don't have the answer to this, we can follow up with the attendee who asked it. Which classes would you recommend to learn the details in the presentation today?
That's an excellent question. Fisher offers 2 classes in both the PDM Standard and the PDM Professional environment. PDM Standard obviously doesn't have all the bells and whistles that we saw today, in particular tasks and templates. Those would be offered in the administration class for PDM Professional only. Both classes, or both products, Standard and Professional, we have 2 class offerings. We have a user class and we have an administrator class. The user class is usually a half-a-day class, and that class either can be delivered in a standard format or it can be delivered in a tailored format, which means, okay, if we've got enough users and you have a very specific vault environment, we can tailor your user class to your vault environment. So your users, when they're being trained how to work in your vault, it's just that. It's your vault. It's not the generic, I'll call it Acme vault that you would learn in the PDM Standard class. The Pro environment, same thing. You would have a user class that would be a half-day class, and it can be tailored as well, or a more standard class. And then we have the 2-day administration class that we recommend at least a couple people take. What I typically name is one person from the IT department and at least one senior CAD user, what I call a power user, somebody that's going to be intimate with that vault environment, using it day in and day out, and therefore is very in tune to what the users need and paying attention to working with that. So we have the administration class offering, and then obviously we also have additional classes above and beyond discussed today where you can actually get into what we call either dispatch, which is a new class offering. I'll call that programming light. You do not have to be a C#, VBA, programming Visual Studio guru. You do not have to have any programming knowledge whatsoever to take the dispatch class. You obviously need some administrative past, working with a vault, understanding what your vault needs are. But so we have that dispatch class offering, and then we also have actual API class offerings in both SOLIDWORKS and in PDM, where you can get into the true hardcore coding and having API calls talking to the vault and from the vault. And that's getting obviously very much into the customization. Those are what we call our 330 level classes, PDM 330, CAD 330. But yes, we have a multitude of offerings, and today's session would have specifically focused on what I call the administrative class for PDM Professional.
Thank you, Joe. I'm glad you did know the answer to that. We have time for a couple more questions. The next one is, does the ECN Vault include the ability to allow for electronic signatures for change approvals?
Absolutely. In my demonstration, I didn't show that, but in any workflow, you could have a workflow requiring signatures. And if you were in a PDM Pro environment, you could require multiple sign-offs, or what we call parallel approvals, meaning I have to have more than one person at the same time approved, meaning, okay, the file is, say, in a state called pending approval, and I want it to be transitioned to a state called released, but the checker has to sign off and, say, a manager has to sign off, both. Well, that's called a parallel approval, and in PDM Pro, we can allow for multiple approvals to be handled like that. And the answer is yes, those approvals could happen, and then that information could be fed right through to a data card, and that information would then show. I could have say a date stamp and an initial category that would say, okay, John approved this yesterday at 3 o'clock, and Bill approved it today at 2 o'clock. So as soon as Bill finished approving it, both signatures were met. So the workflow said, go ahead and release that document. I've met both the requirements.
Thank you. And this is the last question. Is there a limit to how many vaults I can have?
Well, if you think back to mine, no, there is not. Obviously, for me, I'm in a unique environment. Being part of the VAR here, I'm talking to a lot of customers and dealing with training. So I may be opening up any one of those many vaults. As we saw, we dealt with 3 different vaults today. 1, 2, 3, 4 vaults today. So I think I've got 12 or 15 and plans to put in several more for working with customers and training. But in a production environment, the average company might have 2 vaults. You have what's called your production vault, and then we teach you during your administrative class that you always want to have what's called a sandbox. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with that, that's the test environment. I nickname it the sandbox because that's where we go play to make sure any changes we want to make are going to vet out and work just nicely in the sandbox before we put them into production. Last thing you want to do is, as I say, try and change the tire on a car while it's moving. That's not a very smart thing, and it's just about impossible. Well, you don't want to do that to a vault either. You can't bring the vault down while you're trying to work on programming or dealing with some modifications to a workflow. So you do it in the sandbox and vet it out there, and then put it into your production vault. So typically, most customers would have 2, but you could have any number of them for whatever the reasons are. But we would help you structure that during the implementation and help you understand, why you only want 1 vault, or why you need 2, or why would you need multiple vaults.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you, everyone, for submitting your questions. And that concludes our webcast for the day. And just a reminder, you will receive a follow-up email within a couple of days with a link to view the recording. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.